And it's really great to be here. I've known Doug for quite a while now, many years in this industry. I'm Rick with CloudNine, Senior Director of Sales Enablement and Strategy. And today we're talking to Doug from Cobra, and would like to hear, Doug, tell me about what you're doing here at Cobra.
Thanks, Rick. It's A, not only great to be here, but B, talk to somebody that we've been talking to for a long time about all this weird stuff that we do, right? Where kind of the law and data intersect. And it's interesting because when I look back at my career as it is, 20 years in the e-discovery space and 28 working with corporate legal and law firms, there are certain things I've noticed, and my career path evolved basically the same way the industry has. Probably not an uncommon thing, but I started at a little company called Theos in Portland 20 years ago, learning from Mary Mack, what is this e-discovery thing, right? And I realized, it's kind of fun because it's almost like a puzzle. And over this last 20 years, I've worked on the software side as well as the services side. Obviously, I'm kind of a data nerd, so but how do we do these things better, right? And there was good examples of ways to do it. So a little over 10 years ago, I was at a company called Clearwell, and I think we kind of revolutionized some things because we basically had e-discovery on a box, but had lightning in a bottle, and it was partially responsible for that kind of movement away from the volume-based pricing that we've been seeing and pushing that down the curve. And so as we see that now, it's at a good low ebb, and people are finally looking at different ways to take this almost 20-year-old paradigm and do it a little better, right? So, and I've always looked for that. I've always looked for software companies or solution providers that have technology-enabled services to do this. So 4.5 years ago, I was a director at Relativity, a little company you might have heard of in the space. And what I realized was missing was the people side of things. Having very good people at Relativity is great, but it was oriented around just the software, not as much around the outcomes. And what I saw in Cobra, we're this little company, not too little, we're about 400 people, but we've been around 15 years and really serving predominantly corporate legal, but they're outside counsel and other interested parties. And we do a lot of really cool stuff on the dispute side, as well as related to contracts. But the overall theme is we always try to produce better outcomes. Clients will come to us with particular issues, and we're not bound by any particular technology. We will use whatever makes the most sense to get the result that they want. So I think that's the cool part about this from a people and a process and a technology perspective. That's what we do. That's kind of our mantra.
Yeah, what's funny is on that note, I was, scanning through LinkedIn, the social media of business folks, and I saw a great article, the no RCA, approach, and I found that to be really intriguing. It actually looked like a lot of other people did too, and it really shows what Cobra's doing to carve out a better process, just like you're talking about. Would love to hear more about what that means and what the no RCA means there.
Oh, thanks for recognizing that. That was kind of a provocative post, we'll say.
Yep.
I think if you read it, you understood it. But if you didn't, and you just said, Cobra's done away with RCAs, people are going, what? Are they like dissing Relativity, or what are they doing? But no, it really gets back to our concept of service delivery. And that is, it's single threaded. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it really gets down to the quality of the people that you put in these particular roles, and how do you get the best outcomes for clients. And we found that if we hire really good people, not a really basic PM, but they all have 8 to 10 years experience, some are 15 to 20, they're almost all attorneys. And now all of them are either experts or masters. And that's an interesting concept because some companies will just have, 1 or 2 or 3 of those, and then they'll have a bunch of RCAs, and then a bunch of people that aren't even certified, but know how to do the tasks well, right? We have found that with our particular service delivery model, it made more sense to invest in higher level people and encourage them to continue to sharpen their skills. So we actually incentivize them. They get $5,000 when they go from RCA to expert, and 10 when they go to master. So we've got 3 masters now, and there's a 4th in the making. And the rest are all experts. I think there's about a half dozen more that are experts, and some others too that do other particular things. But the reality is the bulk of the people, the project managing attorneys, have that grounding in our space, what goes right and what goes wrong, not just oriented around a particular task.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because you and I have talked quite a bit on, since we work together on some of these pretty significant cases, is that, you have to look a little bit differently than a traditional, sort of process for e-discovery, right? From one to the other, and it's all going to hit the tick boxes all along the way. Well, when we look at modern data, which we can call modern data, like your Slack, your Teams, your corporate chat applications, smartphones, geolocation, social media, you name it, right? There's evidence out there all over the place. It's really, you have to take a different approach, right? You have to look at the case itself and solve the problem differently than versus a traditional e-discovery, linear approach. So I'd love to hear, what are you, when you see modern data involved in some of the cases, for whether it's investigations or discovery, what are you, first of all, what are you seeing and how are you attacking that problem?
Sure. That's, I think, leads well into what we had just talked about. And that is, if you have people that are oriented around outcomes as opposed to just tasks, right? If I just have a processing team and they're a pool, and I have then a database team and an analytics team, and I've got a collections and forensics team, and they're not integrated, and they're not one dedicated team that takes things cradle to grave, you don't get the perspective that when we do stuff here on the front end, it can optimize things on the back end and make review more efficient, right? And so clients come to us with issues. Like one client said, hey, we have a large number of mobile devices, but we know that communications kind of hop channels, right? So, and you've seen this. I mean, with my daughter, it generally starts in Instagram. So, when we're not sending these cat memes to each other, we're corresponding via Instagram. But then often it hops into text messaging, and then it hops from there into email, right? And then back again. And if you don't have not just the solutions, because I think too often we just think of let's go get tech that solves this thing, right? It's people with the integrated knowledge to figure out how to make the most sense out of these things. So a client said, hey, we got all this stuff, and we need to be able to find a way to look at this in context and be able to review it. And that's when, ESI analyst was on the scene. And that allowed us to take a large multi-year project in a big investigation with, I think it was over 100 mobile devices, and then correspondingly all the rest of the data that goes into that, and make sense of that and put it in context, even to the extent where we had to testify related to that and create affidavits around it. So it's all part and parcel of that process, and we have probably well over 200 utilities and tools that we use, just depending on what we're trying to accomplish. So focus with that end in mind, and I think you can do some cool things, especially if your people are incented and supported with finding the solutions that solve those problems.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And I remember that case very well. It was good old late nights and early mornings, but we solved a big problem, right? It was one of those. I remember part of it was because the person of interest, will say, deleted everything off their device, and the judge was like, that's not good. And so that person had to identify all the people that person talked about such and such a thing. Well, that ended up being, as you said, over 100 devices, putting them all into our platform, reconstructing those threads if it came from that person's phone. That's the simple part of the story, right? That's the fun part. And then it was just everything else around it was just, there was a lot of layers of complexity, and you've got great teams to manage it. So it was really fun working together there. And I know we've worked on some other cases as well, but I'd like to either, segue into if there's another case study you would like to share, or, when you're looking at what you're, the problems that you're solving and the corporations you're working with, when you're presenting CloudNine ESI analyst along with all of your solutions, how does that come into play? Like, what are some of those conversations you're having as you're trying to work with these teams to solve, again, these bigger complex problems?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair question. It really gets down to, I use this term a lot. It probably drives my people crazy, but I always say form follows function, right? It's a basic principle of design. Form follows function. We don't just adopt technology and then say, okay, we're Cobra, let's go build a revenue stream around this, because what that does is almost creates an inherent bias for that particular technology. The people that get used to that say, oh, we got this case, let's put it in ABC platform because that's what I know, or that's what we're doing as a company to build a stream. We say, no, that doesn't make any sense. Some tools are better at solving problems than others, just depends. And that's why we focus on the people, right? And so we had a case that we also work with you guys on that had, what do they call it? It's the body footage, the video from a police team, basically. I forget what they keep calling it, and why I'm blanking, I don't know. But basically the body cam, that's what it is. Yeah. Body cam video footage. And we had to take that along with chat messages and all kinds of other things and integrate that, but also even have a workflow and a destruction policy, because so much of this is important, and it was a very heavily charged matter politically. So there was a lot that we had to do. And like you said, that part's like the sexy stuff, right? The cool part of e-discovery is, let's face it, forensics and collections and the things you're dealing with. But the reality is that you still have to make sense of that for what I call the most expensive eyeballs, right? We have to optimize and present things in a way that those that cost the most can achieve the results that they want in the shortest possible time and with the highest level of accuracy. So, it's funny because we all talk about that, but the reality is you have to have the ability to use whatever tool it is, as well as the integrated thinking. So we had a data breach case, for example, for a large client of ours that makes computers. And there was a couple million records. And in data breach, it's a little different. It's not just the typical e-discovery. You have to look at things a little differently, because we're looking to see what was exposed, who was exposed, there's notification that goes in and so on. And in this particular case, there was ransomware too. So instead of just throwing it all into a review platform, because some companies just say, yeah, we're going to review 2 million documents. We looked at the analytics around that and deduplicated out things, as well as looked at what was exposed. And within 48 hours, we're able to isolate and remove over 75% of the data and go back to the corporation and say, hey, you don't really have much exposure here. So here's who you need to contact. But when it comes to the ransomware, they're able to say, sorry, hackers, we're not paying you because there wasn't anything sensitive that was exposed. We'll duly notify those that the records were exposed, but now we've got a better grip on it. And all within, again, 48 hours, rather than looking at 2 million documents. So that's what I'm saying. Let's make sure we look at things. This new type of data requires sometimes new approaches, but building on what we've always done in the past and learning from that and finding better ways.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is when I have a lot of these conversations with whether it's corporate in-house or law firms, it's we need to collect all the slack, we need to collect everything, right? And then it's like, well, no, let's start where it's most important and then see if there's other data that needs to come in versus just pulling everything into a system, like you're saying, and doing it all. We had a case where, it was a whole bunch of Slack data and it was 80 million items and they were going to just get all the attorneys and let's just review it all. And we're like, well, there's the cat meme channel. Are you concerned about that? Right. So we ended up distilling it down to the select users or employees really, and channels of interest. And so those are the types of things you're talking about of let's take a step back, take some breaths and figure out a better approach. And actually this is a great segue into, we'll be out in Dallas, October 11th. Doug and I will be on a panel, and we have some other folks as well that have confirmed, and it'll be all around this modern data discussion, and hearing it from corporate counsel, practitioners, Doug, and then I'll just be up there setting the ball and they're spiking it. I'll be the moderator.
Well, it'll be a lot of fun. More than just war stories, I think a lot of people want to hear what are some of the things you face, but more, what are the best practices you can have?
Right.
And I think too much we think of this whole modern data equation. You know, I joke about this, but it's almost like there is a drinking game around seeing from e-discovery vendors, Teams or Slack is just driving you crazy. Like there's so many webinars on that. It's not that special. Yeah, there's some vagaries to it, but it's still the same thing. It's still content and data, and we have to find ways to make sense of that, because that's what's important. The content is what's determinative, not the fact that it's a little different data.
Right.
So we deal with those things and we put it together in a way that we optimize it for the most expensive eyeballs and give them the most relevant set of data that has the juiciest things. As you said, how do we parse through this and serve it up in such a way that it makes more sense for them? So yeah, I'm really glad we'll be there in Dallas, October 11th. Rich Robinson from Toyota will be there. And there's one or two folks from law firms that also experienced practitioners that can say, here's how we've handled these things. And here are some of the policies and processes we put together.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. It's been a panel I've been moderating all year long and looking forward to this panel as well. So, well, Doug, thank you so much for your time today. This has been just really wonderful, and appreciate your insights and case studies and war stories and just where we are today with this. And looking forward to seeing you here in Dallas soon.
Yeah, likewise, Rick. Look forward to seeing you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care.